Welcome into another edition of Mix in a Water Monday. Joining us today is former Gamecock wide receiver Michael Flint. Mike, good to have you on, bud.
Hey, Mike, how's it going, man? I appreciate you having me.
So, Michael, let's just get right to it. South Carolina for a second straight year under Shane Beamer. They're bowl eligible. Disappointing loss a week ago against Missouri, but to be able to go on the road, beat Vandy, a team that you should win against, get that W. They do it, and like I said, bowl eligible, but they're able to bounce back more than anything.
Yeah, I think what South Carolina had in front of them going into that Missouri game, and kind of just the momentum that the team had. It was such a disappointing loss, and I felt like Missouri was just two steps ahead of us. That whole game, whether it was offensively, defensively, it was like they knew what was coming. But to come out against Vanderbilt, it was good that we came out strong, we came out fast, we maintained momentum throughout the course of the game. It was good to see Rattler be able to get comfortable. And I think the one thing that we simply did that we haven't done a lot this year is we just executed. We executed the way that we should. We executed the game plan. We executed each play offensively. Guys, we played fast. And I think the one thing that I liked and I enjoyed seeing was we got the ball out of Spencer's hand quickly and early, which we were able to get him comfortable. We were able to shift the pocket a little bit, get him out on the run, not just standing back there kind of as a target for those D linemen getting pressure. And that was good to see. I mean, I think that was a big win for the program, not only getting bowl eligible, but kind of getting that momentum back going into this last 3-game stretch that we got in front of us. That's going to be a challenge.
You mentioned on it about the execution. I mean, look, obviously a lot was said last week by a lot of people about the offense as a whole, some of the play calling. I've said this before about the play calling, even going back to the loss against Missouri. I liked what they were trying to do. Run the ball, second play action pass to the tight end, run the ball again. But it was just that consistency. And I'm not saying the consistency was there from start to finish. Certainly not. But it was good to be able to see some of those things that we have seen in the past. And I know there were some trick plays in there. Or they got a little, razzle-dazzle action. But some of those plays that you wouldn't call trick plays, the basic plays, the fundamental plays, it was good to be able to see them hit on them that we've seen in the past that maybe they've missed. Is that something else that you saw when you mentioned the execution?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of it, especially early. We did a lot of that early, and if we'd have come out and not executed on some of those plays, I think it redetermines the tone that is set for the rest of that game, because a lot of what we did with some of those trick kind of gimmicky style plays, we had success. We were able to set them up. With the carry-on joiner, that play, that was huge. I mean, I think if we had not executed on that, I think the tone is set a little bit differently, because we did a lot really early. I think leading off with the reverse to Xavier Legette, I think having success with that, I think was big. So I think it really set the tone of the game early on. And we definitely needed that, because had it been different, I think that the path of that game could have gone a lot differently. But I mean, you're right. It just comes down to execution, and we were finally able to do that consistently and do it throughout the course of the game to really gain that momentum and maintain the momentum throughout 4 quarters.
As a former wide receiver, what do you make of Juice Wells? Because it seems like he makes a big play every game.
I mean, for him, it's just get him the ball and get him the ball often. You saw whether it was down the field, what he does with the ball after he gets it. I mean, some of the quick passes out of the backfield, if it's him versus one other guy, at 5 to 10 yards, he's got the ability to take it, 50 yards or 40 yards. And he can turn a quick pass into 30, 40 plus yards. And I think getting him the ball early and often, not just behind the line of scrimmage, but down the field as well, and finding ways to get him the ball with that route matching up with the timing of the quarterback's drop. He's a dangerous guy. And I think, from the first couple of games of the year, you really got a taste of his athleticism and how good he really can be. And then kind of went missing for a little while. And I think just, finding a way to get him the ball often is going to be really critical to the success of this offense. And I think for Spencer as well. And the key is just getting him comfortable and getting him comfortable early, because you could see how good Spencer Rattler really can be when he gets comfortable back there. he was pressured often a lot throughout the course of these, first part of the season, and he just never got comfortable back there. And now I can see it's the first time he's really felt comfortable. It seemed like he really felt comfortable, and you see the ball just jump out of his hand and how accurate he really can be.
Yeah, you mentioned Rattler, probably one of his better games, 16 of 23, 186 yards, 3 touchdowns. And this is what I always tell people, that whole QBR thing, right? The QBR thing sometimes can be very misleading. His QBR, 56.2. You just listen to the stats I said. 16 of 23, 186, 3 touchdowns. And then you look at, I'm just using the example of another quarterback, which also played in that game, and Mike Wright, backup quarterback for Vandy, 8 for 15, 101, a touchdown, an interception. His QBR is almost 85. So I bring that up because sometimes those stats are a little misleading, right? People get so caught up. And look, in the media, we do that too. We can tell a story any way we want. You look at one stat one way, you look at it another way. You can tell a totally different story. But stats aside, and you mentioned the comfortability, you keep seeing the way that he's progressed at times, but to be able to have a game like that, Mike, right before another big game. I mean, look, these 3 games to close out the year, you're going to be an underdog in all of them. And right now, I believe South Carolina opened as 9-point underdogs against Florida. I'm sure that line might go up and down before Saturday, but this is a huge opportunity and probably your best opportunity too, to get to 7 wins and get to hopefully a better bowl game.
Yeah, this is a big, big week for South Carolina. I think it's for the program as well. I think you look at what Florida's going to do. I think Florida's going to come out and they're going to try to run the ball. Vanderbilt had a lot of success against our defense running the football. And I think that's what Florida is going to come out and try to do. And I think our defensive line has done a really good job this year. I think Zach Pickens has had an unbelievable year, and he's been so disruptive. Just like a Javon Kinlaw used to do. His stats don't necessarily show up, after the game in the stat lines, but how disruptive and how he's able, to eat up blocks up front and get pressure on the quarterback and collapse the pocket has been phenomenal. It's getting those guys behind him, those linebackers, to really, fit, run fits and be very disciplined with their eyes, and defensive ends not flying upfield too early, but really being controlled in how they rush, because you can't open up those run lanes for Richardson to be able to run. So you really, defensive lines really got to be controlled. Linebackers got to have good eye discipline. And I think, we definitely have a chance. And I think using the momentum from this Vanderbilt game, especially offensively, with how kind of stale and stagnant we've been at times, using that momentum going into the Florida game, I think it really is a positive. It really is a positive for us, and building off of it and the confidence I think that these guys have. I think getting Marshawn Lloyd back is going to be huge in its own, just with his vision, hitting the holes. I think there was a couple of times it looked like the line broke down and didn't block well, but we also missed some holes that I think a guy like Marshawn Lloyd sees. A lot of times those holes open and close very quickly, and you got to be able to see those, or you got to see the cutback lane. So getting him back, I think, is going to be huge. But it's a big test. I think there's a lot, that these guys have learned over the course of this season, going into this game with the ups and the downs, and coming off this Vanderbilt game with a lot of positives. With Xavier Legette having a big game, getting his confidence back is huge, because you look at the athleticism that he has from the kickoff return to the touchdown and the reverse. I mean, he's, having him play that well is good. I think most importantly, from what we've seen so far this year, is special teams. Is we got to have big plays on special teams. Each game we've won this year, we've made big plays on special teams, or special teams has flipped the field position, or we've gotten a turnover, and that's been critical. And look back to Missouri, we didn't really do anything on special teams. We didn't have that big play that we normally have, whether it's a block punt, just some sort of flipping the field somehow and utilizing that big play on special teams. And we got that against Vanderbilt. I think going into Florida, that's another thing that we are going to have to have. And I think Pete Limbo's been kind of the MVP this year, because special teams has really won some games for us this year. So that's going to be another critical component on Saturday to beating Florida, is big plays on special teams. And so that's one thing I look to when kind of breaking down this game is where does that big play happen?
One thing I want to ask you before we wrap things up, and it looked like it got better as the game went on. Not one of their better performances tackling wise, but it was one thing that I noticed earlier in the year that South Carolina struggled with, and that was being able to get off blocks on the perimeter from a defensive standpoint, and then obviously being able to finish the tackle. I bring that up because as a wide receiver, what were some of the more challenging moments when trying to block a defensive back? Like what are some of the things that they could do to just make a wide receiver be like, I don't want to block this dude. Like this guy's just a pain in the friggin' ass. Like I don't want to be sitting out here because it just seemed like at times this past week, I always equate it to, Friday night, the senior prom for crying out loud. Looks like they're just dancing on the perimeter. They got better as the season went on, but it looked like earlier in the game, we went back to what we saw from the first couple weeks of the season.
Yeah, I mean the big thing is it's physicality, and when you got a guy out there who's just going to continue coming at you and continuing to be physical and throw you around, whether you're to the play side, whether you're involved in the play or not, when you got a guy that's going to continue just coming at you and just continuing to be physical, it just wears you down, and you tend to get a little more timid and kind of not being as aggressive in getting on the block and maintaining the block. You tend to kind of receive it a little bit more to avoid some of the contact. So, and that, I mean, you're 100% right. That was one of the biggest things I think early in the year that, took a 2 or 3 yard gain that could have been a 20 or 30 yard gain. And that's been huge. And you're right. I mean, I think that's the one thing that we got back to, and especially later on in the game. But that's the big thing is when those defensive backs just continue to be physical and continue to come at you, you tend to get a little timid and you just don't want it anymore. And it's just those guys continuing to be physical and really get, inside of those receivers' hands, really utilizing your, the helmet, shoulder pads, and really getting into those guys and throwing them around and continuing to be physical and not just kind of dancing around, like you said, on the perimeter. But that's been big is perimeter blocking. I think you saw that from the first couple games until, throughout the course of the season as it got a whole heck of a lot better and really in line as well with the tight ends. The tight ends have really stepped up with Atkins and Stogner. They've really done a really good job. I think especially Atkins in being physical and being that guy that can set the edge as well.
And I remember when Atkins committed to South Carolina, his father, Greg, we talked, and he's like, he's not just going to be a guy that's coming here because he has the last name. Like me, we share the last name, and some people are going to look at it. He's like, this guy can ball. And we've seen that, especially in the blocking game. Michael, appreciate you hopping on, and we'll see South Carolina back in action this weekend when they take on the Gators.
Hey, I appreciate you having me, Mike. Thanks. Go Cox.